Hello, and welcome to our program. Glad you could join us. This is looking ahead to keeping water clean, reducing risk in the Maitland Valley and Ausable Bayfield source protection areas. My name is Tim Cumming, and I'm Communications Specialist, and I am interviewing here today a special guest, Jenna Allain. And Jenna is Program Supervisor with the, and get this, Ausable Bayfield Maitland Valley Drinking Water Source Protection Region. That's a long name, Jenna.
It is quite a mouthful. Well, thanks, Tim. I'd like to thank you for hosting the program today. We're in quite a transition phase with source protection planning, and I think it's a critical time to get information out and inform people about what's ahead for source protection. I'd also like to thank our landowners, community members, and our member municipalities for all of the input and knowledge they've brought to this project over the years. It is indeed a local initiative, and we certainly appreciate all the time and commitment that our community members and municipalities have dedicated to this program. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the television station for providing this public service opportunity and allowing us to educate our property owners and residents about source protection.
Well, thank you, Jenna. And today's episode concentrates on source protection planning policies, proposed plans, and the policies as they relate to those landowners in wellhead protection areas of our region. So, first of all, let's start with the basics. What is drinking water source protection? Okay,
well, source protection is it was initiated in response to the events that took place in Walkerton in 2000. It's part of the multi-barrier approach to protecting drinking water that was recommended by Justice Dennis O'Connor, who led the inquiry into the events that took place in Walkerton. And the multi-barrier approach includes things like testing, training, treatment, and distribution, and of course source protection. So the whole goal of source protection is to reduce the risks to municipal drinking water supplies and protect them from contamination or depletion through planning policies, tools such as risk management plans, and voluntary stewardship projects.
Thank you. So when you're talking about the sources of water in this region, what sources of water do we have in this region?
So source protection is very specific. It deals with the protection of municipal drinking water supplies, and that's both groundwater and surface water. So groundwater comes from underground aquifers, and it's drawn up through municipal wells, and surface water in our region comes from intakes in Lake Huron.
Okay, so we have groundwater, we have surface water. Your project, does it relate to all properties and all sources of water throughout the watershed, or are there particular areas you concentrate on?
So we're particularly concerned with municipal drinking water supplies, as I said, and the concentration of source protection plan policies in this region is around municipal well systems primarily, and these areas are called wellhead protection areas.
Okay, so how do you protect drinking water?
Well, there's a local source protection committee, and in partnership with the province and the local people are protecting water through a variety of ways, through voluntary stewardship projects and through source protection planning. So our local source protection committee has developed source protection plans for both the Ausable Bayfield and Maitland Valley source protection areas, which were completed this summer and submitted to the Ministry of the Environment in August for approval.
Okay, so who is doing this source protection planning? Who does it?
So there's a local source protection committee made up of community members that represent municipalities, agriculture, commerce, industry, the public and environmental sectors. The committee has been together since 2007, and they've been working towards the development of 3 different products. They started out with something called the Terms of Reference, which was their work plan for the project. They then moved on to the development of our assessment reports. And the assessment reports are documents that identify areas that are vulnerable to contamination of drinking water supplies, and they also, within those areas, identify various activities that could pose a potential threat to drinking water. Now, for the past 2 years, the committee has been working on their final product, which is our source protection plans, and the plans consist of a series of policies that address the activities that were identified in the assessment reports.
When do those plans come into effect?
So they're with the Ontario Ministry of the Environment right now for review, and they will approve the plans at some point. We anticipate as early as next year, so sometime in 2013, at which point the plan will take effect.
So if people are watching this and wondering, are these planning policies going to affect me? Are these planning policies going to affect a lot of people?
No, more than 90% of the people in our region will not be impacted by source protection plan policies. There will be some people around municipal wells that will have to follow policies, probably about between 500 and 600 landowners within the region will have to follow the policies in the plan, and that's because they're located in highly vulnerable areas around municipal well systems.
So are we talking about institutional properties, homes, farms, businesses? What kinds of properties?
All of the above: homes, businesses, farms, and institutional properties and recreational facilities.
Okay. Now, let's say I'm watching the show and wondering, okay, am I one of the people that is going to have to follow one of the policies your committee comes up with? How do I know if I'm one of those property owners?
You should be quite well aware if you are a property owner that could have policies apply to your property. We've sent a series of letters over the last couple of years to notify landowners. And you can also go to our website, www.sourcewaterinfo.on.ca. You can click on our assessment report tab or our source protection plans tab and review the maps and identify whether your property is in one of our vulnerable areas. Or you can also contact our staff directly. Our phone number is 519-235-2610, and we also have a toll-free number that's 188-286-2610.
Okay, thank you. So the province of Ontario has the experience of what happened in Walkerton, the sickness and the illness and the human cost and the financial cost. And the province says we don't want that to happen again. They create a law, Clean Water Act. They create committees, or their committees formed to protect water in municipal wells. Why do we need protection? What is it that can harm our water?
So we need to keep our water free of contamination and pollution. And types of contaminants include things like pathogens or bacteria. A specific example would be E. coli, and that was what contaminated the well in Walkerton, and that specific strain was E. coli 0157. We also want to keep chemicals out of our drinking water supplies, and there's a particularly nasty type of chemical called dense non-aqueous phase liquids. They're otherwise known as DNAPLs. They're particularly harmful to human health, and they're very difficult to remove from a water supply once it's contaminated. So those are the sorts of things we're interested in protecting our water from. The province has come out with a list of 21 different activities that could pose a potential threat to drinking water.
Okay, I want to ask you about threats, but before I do, you mentioned a big long phrase there, dense non-aqueous phase liquids. Can you give me an example of what that is?
Sure, I should have clarified that. So DNAPLs, or dense non-aqueous phase liquids, they're things like PCBs, but they're also common household products like a degreaser or oil paints, those sorts of things.
Okay, so these are chemicals that we don't want in the water, and the plans affect that. But you mentioned 21 threats. Now, when you use the word threat, that's maybe an intimidating word for a lot of people. What do you mean when you use the word threat?
So there, as I said, there's a list of 21 potential drinking water threat activities that was released by the province. And these are things like application of pesticides, application of road salt, handling and storage of fuel, handling and storage of fertilizers, those sorts of things. And for them to be a significant drinking water threat, they have to meet a specific set of circumstances or criteria, and they need to be located within these areas that are particularly vulnerable around municipal well systems.
So when you talk about a circumstance, what's an example of a circumstance?
So if you take fuel storage, for example, fuel storage is only considered a drinking water threat if it's located, as I said, in these highly vulnerable areas around wells, and if it's being stored in quantities greater than 2,500 liters if it's being stored above ground, and 250 liters if it's being stored below ground.
So here again, the word threat could be scary to some people. So with a threat in this case, is this an immediate threat to our water? Is this an imminent threat, something that people should be immediately concerned about?
No, I mean, if you have one of these activities occurring on your property, it's certainly not an imminent threat to the drinking water, but it has the potential, if there were an accident or a spill to occur, to potentially contaminate a water supply. And so this exercise is all about prevention of those sorts of things, and making sure the appropriate management measures are in place.
Okay, so we're in a rural area and we have septic systems. If I'm a septic system owner, is a septic system, because it stores sewage, is that a threat?
Yes. So under the provincial circumstance tables, septic systems are considered a significant drinking water threat if they are located, again, in these very vulnerable areas around municipal wells. However, septic systems are regulated under the Ontario Building Code, and amendments were made in 2011 to the Building Code, so that what those amendments mean are that any septic system that would be considered a drinking water threat through our program will now be subject to mandatory septic inspections every 5 years. So the policies in our plan simply speak to providing education to those landowners, and that's to be delivered in conjunction with this mandatory inspection program.
Okay, so if I'm a septic system property owner and I'm close to the municipal well, then I have to have it inspected in a certain period of time, years, or how long do I have?
Every 5 years, and the current round of inspections will need to be completed by January of 2017.
Okay, and there will be some education for me as part of the proposed policies for your plans.
Correct.
Okay, so you've used the word threat and or active threat activity, and I look around the area and you have say homes with home heating oil, or farm spreading nutrients, or you have a business such as a dry cleaner or a service station. For those existing businesses, what are you saying? Like, you have a service station owner. With those proposed policies, does that person have to stop pumping gas? Do they have to close their service station down if they're doing it today?
No. For the most part, any existing activities or operations that are currently established will be able to continue with their current practices, provided that appropriate management measures are in place. Now, the source protection plan policies have to address two different types of threats: those that are existing and are already established, and those that could occur in the future and be established in these areas once the source protection plans take effect. And the approaches taken to address existing threats versus future threats are quite different. Now, the Source Protection Committee has chosen to prohibit, for the most part, future threats. And the rationale behind that was that we're talking about fairly limited areas vulnerable areas right around wells. So we should prevent these potential threat activities from being established in those vulnerable areas in the future.
So going back to my example of a service station or gas station, that gas station, if you wanted to open a new one, the policies would say you can't put it right next to the well or one of those areas that could influence the municipal well water. Is that right?
That's correct.
But if it's an existing service station, here again, just as one example of an activity that we'd see every day, how does that get dealt with in the policies?
Right. So the policy is to address existing threats or operations like a gas station. The typical approach has been to provide education followed by something called a risk management plan. And the risk management plan will ensure that the appropriate management measures are being taken on a property to ensure that the drinking water supply is protected. Now, those risk management plans won't be required until 3 years after the plans take effect. So in that interim period, education will be delivered to inform landowners about appropriate management practices in the hopes that some of those practices can be instituted prior to these plans being required.
Okay, and in the next episode of this program, you're going to be talking to us about risk management plans in more detail and for property owners to understand exactly what a risk management plan is, how it would work, and giving us a practical example. So hopefully our viewers can continue to watch our next episode and find out more about risk management plans. So you've talked about policies that are being proposed by this local committee, and they're coming into effect as early as next year. And what about if I'm not in a wellhead protection area? What if I'm not in one of those contributing areas where a contaminant has the potential to affect the municipal well supply? Are there policies for other areas of the region?
There are a few policies in the plan that apply to other parts of the region, but these are generally recommendation type policies, and they don't have the same legal effect as most of the other policies. They're a non-legally binding policy. So those policies speak to things like education in broader areas about potential threats to drinking water. There's also policies that recommend municipalities review their emergency spills and response plans. And there's also a recommendation policy that signs be established on local roads and area highways around municipal well systems in these wellhead protection areas to alert travelers that they're entering a vulnerable area. Thank you.
You mentioned municipalities several times. You talked about municipalities being on the committee. You talked about the roles for municipalities. It sounds like they're very involved in this. What's the role of municipalities?
That's right. So once the plans take effect, municipalities will be one of the primary implementers of source protection plan policies. So they'll be responsible for the establishment of things like risk management plans, as well as being involved in the delivery of education.
Okay. And if people want to find out more, they've been watching this program and there have been questions that they still have that haven't been answered, how would they find out more about this planning process?
Well, we certainly have a lot of information on our website. You can go to it at www.sourcewaterinfo.on.ca, or you can contact our staff at the numbers I provided earlier, 519-235-2610. We also have a toll-free number, and we also have our stewardship staff available to speak to landowners about potential stewardship projects, and that number is 519-335-3557.
Okay, so you can find out from phoning that number about stewardship and projects that you can do, and to find out the status of programs that may have money available, and certainly That's one way to find out. Jenna, what's your long-term vision for drinking water source protection? Like, looking forward, what do you think will happen, or what do you see happening, or what are the benefits of this do you see? How is this going to change Ontario?
Well, planning policies will not take effect until next year at the earliest. Municipalities, as we talked about, will be involved in implementing the policies. Education will be delivered so that people living in these vulnerable areas will be very aware of potential threats and contamination of drinking water supplies. And then we'll have this requirement for risk management plans within 3 years. There'll be sort of more established management measures in place, and overall we should generally have a much higher level of protection for drinking water sources in Ontario.
Thank you. And are there any actions people are taking right now, like out there? Are there things people are doing right at the moment to protect drinking water?
Yes, certainly. We've had a stewardship program running for the last 4 years now, 4 to 5 years now, and it's funded through the province of Ontario. It's the Ontario Drinking Water Stewardship Program. We've had many landowners across the region take advantage of the stewardship fund to institute management measures already. Excellent.
Do you have any closing words on the topic of source protection, drinking water source protection?
Just to thank everyone that's been involved in the source protection planning process to date. Thank the landowners who have already taken advantage of stewardship funds and taken a proactive step towards protecting drinking water, and to contact us if you'd like any more information.
Okay. And so as far as looking forward, if let's say somebody's watching this program and they're thinking, okay, the plans take effect maybe next year, they have a few years to adapt to this and incorporate the policies into their operations?
Yes, certainly. There'll be more information coming out as we get closer to the plans taking effect. We're providing more opportunities for landowners that are within these vulnerable areas. We're working with municipalities to ensure that implementation of the source protection plans goes smoothly, and there should be lots of information available in the future.
Thank you. How many people are we talking about in terms of how many properties?
I think I mentioned earlier it's between 500 and 600 properties that will have to follow some sort of source protection plan policy on their property.
Thank you. We have been talking with Jenna Allain, and Jenna is Program Supervisor with the Ausable Bayfield Maitland Valley Drinking Water Source Protection Region, and we're so glad that you've been able to join us for this program. It has been looking ahead to keeping water clean, reducing risk in this local region, and we thank all the landowners, all the property owners who have already taken steps with some financial incentives from the Ontario Drinking Water Stewardship Program to improve their properties, but also to protect drinking water. And we especially thank this station for the public service they have undertaken to provide this valuable information to the people in this region who have a special interest in these planning policies that are taking effect next year, but also the wider community that has an interest in keeping their municipal drinking water sources clean. So I would invite you to please stay tuned for our next episode, where we take a more in-depth look at risk management plans and what they are, and the tools that your local source protection committee can use in cooperation with municipalities and property owners to protect your drinking water. Thank you for watching Reducing Risk. I'm Tim Cumming.